Hi juniors, welcome to Computer Systems and Programming. This is the Mathematical Operators practice video, the one you're watching right here. If you want to go and download the math outline and complete it as you are watching the video, that way you can submit it with this activity prompt. So when you download it, it'll look like this. You'll see this error, click that, and then you can download it into your computer. I have it downloaded to my desktop where I have created a folder called Mathematical Operators, and in that folder is the math outline. So let's get to work. For mathematical operators, we need some syntax. This syntax is like the grammar for coding, and to use mathematical operators, you would use it by creating the variable and then setting it to data, operator, data. So for this data, we're going to use two string characters. So let's start with x is set to string. And then our operator, since up here it'll say plus, we're just going to use plus. And then string. Now, on the bottom of this, I have print x, so I'm going to run this, and it'll just put string, string, because there's two of them. Now, you notice there's no space, but that's because we have to actually put the space in as a character. So if I put a space here and then run it, it'll be string, string. So if you're ever trying to add some string characters together, make sure you don't forget the space, because that's also considered a character. Now let's make a new one called x is set to two integer variables. So if you remember, integers are just like numbers, whole numbers. So if we do 13 plus 47 and we run that, it'll make 60. You're also going to do the same thing with the minus operator. So if I were to do 60 minus 12, that'll give us 48. And you can even combine these if you want. So if I want to add another addition, it'll do that. It'll run it out. So it's pretty useful. Now we're going to make two float variables with the subtraction operator. It's pretty much the same thing. So if x equals 34.54 minus 12.3, then you'll get some float variable. And it's also for the multiplication. For multiplication, we use the little star symbol. So if I do x is set to 3 times 4, it'll give us 12. We don't use like a big X or something. No, it has to be this star symbol. So this one right here, we're using two different data sets. So if we have the string variable and then the integer variable, and you multiply them, what's going to happen? Let's try that out. So x is set to the string of pi, and we're going to multiply that by 3. We get pi, pi, pi. So it just multiplies the string by the integer variable. Now if I were to add a space here, it would also include that. If you also see if I can highlight it, it's also adding a space at the end too. So there's a space in between every pi and at the end. Now we're going to make two integer variables using the slash operator. This is the division. So if I set x to 12 divided by 4, that's going to give us 3. And then we can do some float variables. Let's give us a big number. Now let's do two integer variables with the percent sign operator. If you don't remember what this is modulo. That's okay. We can just see what it does here. So if I do 5% sign, 2, it'll give us 1. That's because it's taking the remainder. So if I were to have 7, it's going to be 1. If I were to have 120, and then I'm going to do 3, it's going to give me 0, because 3 evenly divides into 120. If I were to do 7, it'll give me 4. It'll give me 1, because it'll be going into 120 so many times, and then there'd be 1 left over that it can't get into. Now we have two integer variables with the division operator. This division operator, the double division, is the floor division. And that basically drops the remainder. So if I were to have x 120 floor division 7, it's going to give me 17 because 7 goes into 120 17 times fully. There is a little bit of remainder, but that cuts it off because of the floor division, the way that works. If I just do regular division, it'll be this random big float. But the floor division gets rid of that. So that's pretty cool. Now we have two integers and the double star sign. This is the exponentiation. So if x set to 4 and then 4, if you know what 4 to the power 4 is, that's 256. I didn't know that, but we have the code here to tell me. So we can make some really big numbers too. And it's really cool and useful to have the exponentiation. This is basically just big calculator, but these are really useful when you get into your projects and some of the other things you might be doing with code. Now this would be syntax error. This is like an error in the grammar of the code. So if I were to just do 4 divided by 2, it's not gonna store it in anything. There's nothing to store it into. When you use these mathematical operators, you still have to store it in something, and then print x. It'll give me my answer here. So syntax error, you want to make sure you have this proper grammar like we talked about at the beginning of the video, which is variable set to data operator data. And you can do more operators in data, so it doesn't have to be one operation here. A cool thing with the operators is you can do it for variables too. So if I were to make y is set to, let's say, 5, and then we have z is set to x floor division y, we have this really big number here being divided by 5. So let's just print this out real quick, and we get 13,107. So it goes in there that many times. If we want the exact answer, it'll go in there that many times. Now, another thing is the int function. This is converting things to integers. If I were to run this as let's say z is set to 8 as a string, and then I put this z in there, which is basically saying it's the 8, but it's a string character, it's going to give me an error because you can't exponentiate by a string. It doesn't work. That's like trying to exponentiate by the word the. It doesn't really make sense. So I would have to use the int function, which converts it to an integer. So if I run this, it'll run it just as if it's a normal 8, but it's using it as the integer. So those are some things to keep in mind. It's a little wonky to have the string character for a number, so we usually just convert it to an integer because it doesn't work the way we want.